On December 27, 1892, Livingstone and Biddle College, now known as Johnson C. Smith University, played in Salisbury, North Carolina, with Biddle winning 5-0. Over time, HBCU football has evolved. HBCU football's popularity continues to rise. Millions attend games each year and millions more watch on television. The HBCU bands provide some of the top entertainment in the country. Over that time, some of the best players to ever play in the National Football League played at HBCUs. Every Monday through Friday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, national radio and television host Donal Ware takes a look at what's happening in HBCU football and talks with coaches, players, administrators, and media about the season. Make sure you join the conversation on social media. Now, here's your host, Donal Ware.
This is the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Wednesday, August the 2nd. I'm Donal Ware, the Hump Day edition of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. With it being August 2nd, that means we are 24 days away from the start of the HBCU football season, when on Saturday, August the 26th, Florida Memorial hosts LaGrange. Langston going to be on the road at Mid-America Nazarene, and Jackson State and South Carolina State meet in Atlanta, the MEAC and the SWAC getting together. And you're talking about a rematch in that particular football game of the 2021, what was in essence the national championship game. So it should be a pretty exciting opening week in HBCU football. But again, we're 24 days away from that. So the 2023 HBCU College Football Preseason All America team was released on Tuesday, as a matter of fact, on yesterday. And we're going to go through the list of the HBCU All Americans. Now, at the quarterback is Davius Richard, the quarterback from North Carolina Central. Now, you could have, to me, he definitely was the choice to be the quarterback on that team. No doubt about that. You can look at the likes of a Jeremy Moussa from Florida A&M. No doubt about it, as I talked about before when we previewed the SWAC on last week. I think that when you look at Jeremy Moussa, I think he's going to be much better in this Willie Simmons offense. But for me, when I think about Davius Richard, I think about arguably the best all-around quarterback in HBCU football last year. You could argue Jeremy Moussa, you could argue Donovan Riddick from West Virginia State. You could order you could also go with, the quarterback from Fort Valley State. It's any number of guys that you could have gone with. But I like Davius Richard. Was responsible last year for 40 touchdowns, 25 passing, 15 rushing. He rushed for close to 800 yards. He threw for close to 2,700 yards last year. His pass efficiency was one of the tops in the FCS. And he could get it done. He was an excellent passer, and he could get it done with his legs as well. Plus, he had a really good game against Jackson State, where he was responsible for 3 touchdowns in that game. He was efficient. I think it was 15 of 20 for in excess of 150 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions. And then he rushed for another 70 yards with a couple of touchdowns. So he was definitely efficient against a solid defense in Jackson State on last year. And I think, again, the best all-around quarterback in HBCU football, because he's a passer first, but he's not a pocket passer. And he's to me, he's equal. And I've been watching Davius Richard since 2019. I had a chance to actually call a couple of the games he's played in since 2019. Back in 2019, when he played, at the time that he played, this was in the latter part of the season, I think he was like a 3rd or 4th string quarterback coming in, and look what he's done. He's going to go down in North Carolina Central as one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play in Durham, for the Eagles. So to me, that was a no-brainer. Your running backs, Jada Byers and Jarvian Howard. Jada Byers out of Virginia Union rushed for over 1,500 yards last year, like 20 touchdowns, something like that. Jarvian Howard, a tremendous season for Alcorn State. As I mentioned last week during the SWAC preview, had Alcorn State had consistent play at the quarterback position, we may have been talking about, really should have been talking about Alcorn State as the champs in the Western Division of the SWAC. Your offensive lineman, Jalen Goss from Florida A&M, was an HBCU All American to end the season last year. You've got Cameron Coben out of Florida A&M as well. Torricelli Simpkins, the third from North Carolina Central. Tariq Stewart out of North Carolina A&T. And then Jonathan Williams out of Alabama A&M rounds out the offensive lineman. Your tight end is DJ Stevens from Jackson State, and expect Jackson State to really utilize that tight end position. And DJ Stevens had a pretty solid year in 2022. It was really a nice part, semi-integral part of that Jackson State offense on last year. Your wide receivers, Devin Smith out of North Carolina Central. Devin Smith can really play. And Jaquez Jones out of Lane. That guy can really play as well. Your defensive lineman, Lubert Danilis of Benedict, was an HBCU All-American on last year. I mean, this guy gets after the quarterback, high motor, and he's going to be a key to Benedict's defense in 2023. Sundiata Anderson, who has been tabbed as the SWAC's preseason Defensive Player of the Year. One of the other offensive linemen, Patrick Godbolt, out of South Carolina State, was one of your offensive linemen. Again, South Carolina State poised. Got it. I mean, it can't be a worse season for the Bulldogs than it was last year. And I think Godbolt, Green, all of those guys are going to be refocused for 2023. And then Elijah Williams out of Morgan State. This is a young man that had 19 tackles for loss for a Morgan State defense that is going to be very good. You heard it here on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Wednesday, August the 2nd. Remember that name, Elijah Williams, and that Morgan State defense is going to be very, very good in 2023. Your linebackers, Colton Adams from Alabama State. He was a young man that was an All-American on last year. Isaiah Major out of Florida A&M. Look for big things from Isaiah Major this year, especially when you're looking at an Isaiah Land and Stevens, both gone. Land, sort of that hybrid linebacker defensive end position, and then Stevens gone, true lineman, entered the transfer portal. And then Jaleel Lenore out of Central State had in excess of 100 tackles as a freshman on last year, and he's going to be poised to have a big season for Central State in 2023. Your defensive backs, a couple of holdovers from the HBCU team on last year. Khalil Baker from North Carolina Central, the reigning MEAC Defensive Player of the Year. Very good football player. Guy's a very, very talented and good football player. And then you look at Kenny Gallup. Kenny Gallup is really, really good for the Howard Bison. I think that's going to be a solid Howard defense as well. Karan Prunty from North Carolina A&T, also a defensive back. And then a tie for that last defensive back position, Kendall Bowler of Florida A&M and Omar Hill Robinson out of Bethune-Cookman. Omar Hill Robinson, a ball hawk. He was an honorable mention, HBCU All-American on last year. And Bowler's very good. Again, going to have a solid defense there in Tallahassee for Florida A&M. Your specialists, we had a tie at the punter position. Ryan Duff of Tuskegee averaged close to 43 yards per punt. Last year, he had 12 punts down inside the 20 and 50 punts in excess of 50 yards. So a good punter right there, can hold that field position for Tuskegee. A lot of people think Tuskegee is going to have a good season, and they had a solid season on last year, playing in another SIAC championship game on last year. Dyson Roberts out of South Carolina State, the other punter as well, got a lot of action. Did Dyson Roberts on last year. Your place kicker is Adrian Olivo out of North Carolina Central. He's really, really good, and it's been good for a number of years in the Eagle program. Your punt returner is Hakeem Ellington from Fort Valley State. Your kick returner is Keith Jenkins from Morgan State. As a freshman last year, returned 2 kickoffs for touchdowns on last year. And then your return specialist is once again Hakeem Ellington, because not only does he get it done in the kick return department, he also gets it done in the punt return department as well. And one of the things that we do with the HBCU All American team is we separate the punt returner, the kick returner, and the return specialist. A lot of conferences and their All American or their all conference teams will have a return specialist. But you have guys, because a kick returner isn't necessarily a punt returner and vice versa. You have guys that specialize in kick return, because obviously if you're a kick returner, your blockers are going to set up the wall, high kick. A lot of times it'll go in the end zone. You make a decision whether you want to come out or not. Whereas the punt returner, it's a little bit different. You got those gunners coming down the field. You got to be able to make a determination quickly as to whether you're going to call for a fair catch, whether you think you can catch it and run, make some yards, etc. So it's 2 different positions, and that's why we have a kick returner, a punt returner. But sometimes you do have a person that does both, thus the return specialist. And Hakeem Ellington of Fort Valley State did a really good job of that on last year. So that's the HBCU preseason All-America team. Of course, you can check out the All-America team, the preseason All-America team in its entirety on our website at BOXTOROW.com. Don't forget to tell a couple of friends about the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, where you can watch us on the Box to Row YouTube channel. You can also listen to us online at BOXTOROW.com as well as iHeartMedia.com. Keep the comments coming. We've had a lot of people to watch and listen to the podcast. Keep the comments coming on our Twitter page at BoxToRow. You can comment there as well at BoxToRow, BOXTOROW. Talk with you tomorrow.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast at BoxToRow.com, iHeartMedia, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to get your HBCU football fix on Box to Row with Donal Ware each weekend on the radio station near you, and on SiriusXM on HBCU, Channel 142, and on ESPNU Radio on SiriusXM, Channel 84. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Box to Row for the latest in HBCU football, and don't forget to tell a friend.